I'm basically here to answer questions regarding an independent review of the Kevin Brown shooting that I've asked the city manager to authorize, and she has authorized that independent review. And so, therefore, I'm here to answer any questions relative to that request and the authorization.
Clint, have y'all ever asked for an independent review of an internal affairs investigation, ever?
I believe in the history of the police monitor's office, there's been 2 times that a independent investigation has been asked for. Since I've been here, my tenure has only been for the past 10 months, and obviously this is the first time that I've had occasion to make a request.
But prior to disciplinary action?
Right, I believe in, yes, that's...
Two other cases prior to it going to the
Well,
chief?
no, I think one case was the Sophia King case. And the only other case I believe where there was an independent investigation was not a case involving a shooting. I believe it was a case involving Commander Shauna Jacobson, who tragically had a motorcycle accident.
Why did you ask for this review?
Well, based on the facts and circumstances of this particular case and the gravity of this case, I felt that it was only appropriate and prudent to ask for an independent review of the investigation in this case. I'll tell you that in my mind, I think it's best for building trust, for maintaining trust in some cases, and rebuilding trust, quite frankly, in some cases, between the community and the Austin Police Department. I think that it is the most prudent thing to do in a case that such as this, where a young man lost his life.
But aren't internal affairs investigators supposed to be unbiased and supposed to be conducting that investigation already? Or weren't they doing that?
Yes, that's exactly what they do. But again, given the factual circumstances of this case, I believe that for the sake of transparency and like I said, for the sake of building, maintaining, and rebuilding trust, I think it's important that an independent body have a chance to look at the thoroughness, the investigatory techniques, and ultimately the conclusions of the Internal Affairs Division of the Austin Police Department in this case.
Were the results of the Internal Affairs investigation that you've seen directly related to your request for the review?
I can't really speak to those findings. I understand that there was a memo that I wrote to the city manager that was released to the press, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak to those findings. But suffice to say that just based on the facts and circumstances of the case, I think it is appropriate for an independent review to take place.
So you also can't address specific concerns you might have?
Right, I can't really address the specific concerns of the investigation at this time. I can tell you that entity by the name of Kroll Government Services will be conducting this independent review.
How much is this review going to cost?
That's a very good question. It's given a lot of consideration, but quite frankly, I think it's worth whatever the cost is at this point. But there are 2 investigators. Well, actually, they're the president of Kroll Government Services. His name is Jeffrey Schlanger. And he will hire a police consultant by the name of Jeffrey Noble, who's an attorney and also a police consultant, and they will charge themselves out at $325 and $275 per hour, respectively.
Is 2 weeks really enough time for this investigation to be thorough?
Well, it's not really an investigation, and I think that is actually a great point in that it only can really be a review, and what they will be doing in light of the fact they only have such a short period of time, they will really just be reviewing the Internal Affairs investigative file.
So what are you hoping comes out of the review?
Well, I just think it's important that this entire process be vetted as transparently in the public's eye as possible. And so what I'm hoping comes out of this is that the public feels confident and they feel very comfortable with whatever ultimately happens, in that this was vetted as thoroughly as humanly possible. And so I'm hoping that it provides the measure of transparency and comfortability and confidence in the process of oversight, but also in the Austin Police Department ultimately.
So the fact that this information is out there now, isn't that a violation of Mr. Olson's civil service rights? Because the information hasn't gone to the chief or hasn't been formally decided on. There's been no finding specifically, I guess, from the chief. So isn't that information that's supposed to be private?
Well, the measure of the findings, there are certain things that were in the letter that should not have been released without being redacted. But I can tell you that the chief, myself, and others had spoken about this prior to the release of that memo, so it's not a surprise in that regard.
When did y'all start talking about it, Clay?
Well, some time ago, myself and the police monitor's attorney liaison from the city attorney's office had been speaking about the process, not specifically relative to this case, but we had been speaking for some time about putting in process or in place the process of hiring an independent investigator so that there would be firms, entities, and/or persons who would be available to conduct this type of investigation. And so it worked out such that it's going to be done on short notice, and so we then did have entities and people in mind and in place to make such a short request.
In the memo, it says that you received a verbal briefing from Commander Johnson about the findings. Was that information that you should have been told? Like, was that information that you should have had access to?
Okay, again, I'm not going to really discuss the substance of those memos, but suffice it to say there are certain things that should have been redacted.
Maybe I can ask it a different way. Are information that Internal Affairs finds, once they're done with their investigation, like in this case, isn't that information supposed to be kept private, or are you one of the people who could have access?
Right, I will have access to that. Yes, absolutely.
Before it goes anywhere else?
Absolutely, absolutely.
If you say you hope that one of the outcomes is going to be that the public feels this process was completely vetted, does that mean that in every case of an internal affairs investigation like this one, that we will have an independent review paid for by taxpayers?
No, absolutely not. I think that what it comes down to my judgment, obviously, but then it comes down to the facts and circumstances of this particular case. And I can't speak about specifics, but suffice it to say, there's enough in the public domain relative to this case that I think people can draw their conclusion as to why I might, in this case, call for an independent review.
But I just want to make sure I understand the timeline. You guys were talking about doing this even weeks ago. Is that correct?
No. We were talking about putting in place a system to have entities in place if there were going to be an independent review of a case, but we were not speaking about this specific case. Obviously not.
So if the outcome of this review finds any kind of wrongdoing, then what?
Then it needs to be addressed. And so therefore, I think that it serves a purpose, like I said, about trust and confidence, but also I think it could serve a educational purpose, a purpose to bring a light on issues that might need to be addressed if that were to be the outcome of this type of investigation. So I think it can serve a multitude of purposes.
Forgive my ignorance, but the review is, these people will be reviewing the investigative process, the internal affairs investigation specifically, is that right? Correct.
They'll be reviewing the and doing a qualitative review of the thoroughness of the investigation, the appropriateness, the investigatory techniques, and ultimately the conclusions of the Internal Affairs Division relative to this particular case.
So I know you can't speak on behalf of the chief, but do you think before the DRB is scheduled, he would wait to see what the independent investigator found, or would he just go ahead and rule based on the internal affairs investigation?
Again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the chief, period. But I think he'll consider everything available to him prior to making his decision. That's what I think he would do.
So 2 people will be hired, one at $325 an hour, one at $275 an hour.
That
Which was it?
Jeffrey Schlenger, who's the president of Kroll Government Services.
He's the 325.
Yes, and then Jeffrey Noble, who is an attorney and a police consultant who will be hired by Kroll.
And there's no cap
There will be.
There will be.
There will be.
There you go. Thank you, Gene.
What is that?
Well, so you know that.
And again, this is just going to be really a review, so we don't anticipate this to take an extraordinarily great length of time.
Have you talked to the Brown family at all? Are you in communication with them at all?
No.
So Cliff, they will not re-interview witnesses or?
No, they will not have time to do any of that. And so we are really under a great, extreme time crunch right now.
Without getting into specifics, it would seem like a normal assumption that if you've called for this review and all they're going to do is look at the investigative findings, you're not happy with what you've seen.
I'm not going to speak to the findings because the findings aren't really in the public domain, but I just think it's appropriate in this particular case, given the facts and circumstances, to have this independent review.
Let me try that a different way. If you were pleased with their findings, would you be still calling for the same review?
There are circumstances probably where I would not call for an independent review.
Okay, so since we all know the information is out there, and I know whether you can comment or can't comment, where does Sergeant Olson's rights come into play here since it's out? Can anybody talk about that? Like since this information is supposed to be private and it's not now, what happens now?
I'll address those, Melissa.
Okay.
I don't want Cliff to talk about the
Sorry.
memo itself, so I'll address those for you. Thanks, Cliff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Michael. Okay.
So to ask it-
Sure.
So my question is, since this information that was released, even though whether it's supposed to or not, it's out there, and we're all going to have it, we all have it. It's supposed to be private, apparently, and this is his, information that he didn't, apparently Sergeant Olson wasn't aware of, and now it's out there. And so what happens now that his civil service rights?
Well, let me go through the chronology so everyone knows. This morning we had a media request for information regarding this independent review. The Communications and Public Information Office received a copy of the memo, unredacted. At that point, we were unaware that it had to be redacted. In the spirit of our office, which is of openness, of transparency, and to get information out to the media as quickly as possible, we shared that memo with the media, with that member of the media. We subsequently had 2 additional requests for the memo. An unredacted version of that memo was shared with those 2 media members. It was at that point that in speaking with our legal department, it was determined that the memo should not have gone out unredacted and should have been redacted for information that should not be going out there. At that time, I did, and our office did, our due diligence in sharing a redacted version with all the media members who had gotten it, in addition to ceasing our practice of sharing the unredacted version to anyone else who asked for it. That's the chronology of what occurred.
So what happens now? Anything?
At this point, there's not really a way to unring the bell. I will tell you that the error occurred out of my office. The Office of the Police Monitor had nothing to do with the release of the unredacted memo. The Austin Police Department